Hi, everyone. Welcome into this Zoom space. Um, we've still got people coming in, but I'm going to start and people can just catch up where they come in. So, again, welcome to this Montana Book Festival event, this MBF Plus off-season event, brought to you in partnership with Fact and Fiction Books here in Missoula, Montana. My name is Lauren Korn. I'm the director of the Montana Book Festival. And as usual, and first, I want to take care of a little housekeeping before we get into this conversation with thriller authors Jack Carr and Connor Sullivan. Um, First off, if you are interested in purchasing copies of Jack's book, The Devil's Hand, or pre-ordering Connor's book, Sleeping Bear, I urge you to purchase them through our festival sponsor, Fact and Fiction Books, at factandfictionbooks.com. They have agreed to donate 10% of all book sales of our festival titles back to the festival. All you have to do is enter MBF at checkout. We get 10% of those sales. So if you want to support the festival, if you want to support Fact and Fiction, please order through them. And just for a little incentive tonight, if you're one of the first 20 people to purchase a copy of The Devil's Hand, Jack's book, you'll receive an advanced reading copy, and I've actually got one here, an advanced reading copy of Connor's book, Sleeping Bear. So audience, get on that. It's a great deal. 2 for 1, basically. I also want to give a special shout out to our tried and true fiscal sponsor, Arts Missoula. They've been with us since, I think, 2015. We absolutely could not do what we do without them. And then audience members, if you're interested in sponsoring the Montana Book Festival, or if you want to sponsor a month of MBF Plus events, reach out to me directly, montanabookfestival@gmail.com. Regarding the event tonight, feel free to submit your questions to Jack and Connor via the Q&A at the bottom of your screen. Here on the back end of things, we'll be reading your question, monitoring your conversation, all of that. And you can use the chat function for conversation, the Q&A for your questions specifically. Jack and Connor will address those probably towards the end of the conversation, but as they feel fit. So with that, with my little ramble, I'd like to introduce Jack and Connor to this event tonight. Jack Carr is a New York Times bestselling author. I hear The Devil's Hand is number 3 on the list today. And he's a former Navy SEAL. He lives with his wife and 3 children in Park City, Utah. And he is the author of The Terminal List, True Believer, Savage Son, and the brand spanking new, the reason we're here tonight, The Devil's Hand. Connor Sullivan attended the University of Southern California, where he was the recipient of the Edward W. Moses Award for Creative Writing. During college, he worked for Warner Brothers, reading screenplays before relocating with his family to the Gallatin Valley here in Montana. His first novel is Sleeping Bear. So, Jack, Connor, welcome to this MBF Plus event.
Oh, wow. Thank you so much for having me. This is awesome. So cool.
Yeah, thank you.
And I get to meet Connor for the first time. I've heard so much about you, and I have the book, and I'm reading it right now. And
Nice.
I wanted to get through the whole thing before we talk tonight, but it's been a crazy few weeks. So the action just moved to Kamchatka Peninsula, Russia, which of course I'm very interested in because I went there researching my 3rd book. So super excited, and this thing is awesome. I can't wait to get to the end of it so that we can talk about it when it comes out in July, right?
Yep, July 6th.
Awesome. Perfect. Awesome. So this is great. Let's do it.
Yeah, sweet. So again, I just want to say congrats. Number 3, New York Times bestsellers list. That is a massive accomplishment. Yeah, I don't know what that feels like.
It's crazy. I mean,
You found out yesterday, right?
Yeah, I found out yesterday,
Wow.
and then Savage Son was the first one to hit it last year, so that was crazy. Getting that word from Emily Bessler, our editor publisher, for the first time when she called with that news. So, because you grow up reading all these books, and you're seeing that on the top of them. So you're reading these books by David Morrell and Nelson DeMille and all these guys, and you're seeing that across the top, and then get the call that you're up there on that thing is pretty special.
Yeah, that's amazing. Congratulations. So yeah, let's just start off. Let's talk about, I have my advanced reader's copy. I have yet to get my real copy, but
I can't believe they didn't. David Brown, are you watching this? As if you are,
there it is.
I cannot believe we didn't send a hardcover, because there's the The galleys always have little mistakes in there that drive me crazy.
I know.
Word repetition, and you're like, oh, I can't believe I missed that. After the 50 other times I read this thing, and then the 51st time I caught that word in the same, one sentence below. So we'll have to get you a hard copy for sure.
Sweet. But yeah, so do you want to just tell the audience like what the book is about, where you got the idea from, and then kind of talk about how while you were writing it, COVID hit, and what were you thinking? Because it would have freaked me out. So yeah, I'll just let you start, and then we can just go with flow of conversation.
Yeah, no, sounds great. So each book so far has had a distinct theme. And the first one was really all about revenge without constraint. That second one, True Believer, is really a journey of redemption. Third one, Savage Son, is the one I wanted to start with, actually. But when I wrote all these 7, 8, 9 different ideas down, these one-page executive summaries before I started, I knew that the characters weren't yet developed to the place where I could explore the theme that Savage Son explores, which is the dark side of man through the dynamic of hunter and hunted. So I had to start with the terminal list, and it was very evident that that was the one to start with, just hard-hitting, primal, visceral right out of the gate. By the time I got to that third one, that's the one I wanted to write since 6th grade, when I first read Most Dangerous Game by Richard Connell, written in 1924. So even back in 6th grade when I was 11, I knew that one day I'd write a thriller that paid tribute to that short story. So once I finished with that one, just took a breath and I wanted to explore something in this fourth one that I thought about a lot while I was in the SEAL teams, and what I continue to think about today as an author and a citizen, which is, what has the enemy learned by watching us on the field of battle for the last 20 years at war? So what if I was Iran, China, Russia, North Korea, a super empowered individual, a terrorist organization? They've had 20 years essentially to watch us play poker, see our cards, see how we're playing those cards, and then apply those lessons to future battle plans. And there's this distinctly different paradigm for terrorism between like 1979 and 2001, and then 2001 and today. So I have some characters that lived through that time period in the 80s and 90s, and then others that are younger, that came up in that post 9/11 era as well. So I really wanted to explore that theme. So that was the foundation. And I started to write. It was actually on my plane ride to and from Kamchatka in August of 2019 that I outlined the whole thing. I left my computer behind. I left my phone behind because I didn't want to walk through and have both of those confiscated or have all the information sucked out, because who knows what people have sent me over the years. So I left those behind and brought a sat phone and my notebook, and I outlined the whole novel in this notebook. And then I got home and wove some of that local flavor from Russia into the third novel, and then started researching this fourth one. And I had a pretty good idea about what the enemy had learned by watching us on the field of battle, and what lessons terrorist organizations would have taken from that. But I needed something to move the plot forward. I needed like a catalyst, and that what became a bioweapon. So I started researching the weaponization of infectious diseases and went super down the rabbit hole on that. So by the time COVID hit, then I was very sensitive to what was happening, because I was just doing all this research for the previous 5 months on infectious diseases, and at the same time having the basis of the novel being what the enemy has learned. Well, they're always learning, and so I knew they were learning from our response to COVID. So I wrote that in. And then a summer of civil unrest hits. I'm like, well, I'm in the enemy's shoes, and what are they learning from watching this? So that gets written in. And then we hit a very contentious political season and election cycle. So once again, the enemy's not just looking at these things with a passing interest. They are taking notes, and they're applying these lessons to their battle plans. So looking at all those things from the enemy's perspective, it became a much more timely novel than I thought when I outlined it in August of 2019.
Yeah, I mean, I think when the first thing I thought when I read The Devil's Hand was just the amount of research. I mean, I'm doing a ton of research right now for book 2, and I just looking at what I read in yours, I'm like, he must have spent months. Like, how many months do you think you spent doing this? It was just
So a lot of it was the foundation side, like the warfare side. Luckily, growing up, even before my time in the military, I was reading all these thriller authors, but at the same time, I was reading everything I could find on warfare, terrorism, insurgencies, counterinsurgencies. So I was building up this, and that both of those things continue today. So that part was there. So I had to go back and confirm things that I thought I knew, or things that I'd read about, but it had been years, that sort of thing. So I needed to confirm a lot, and then through that research, go down a few other rabbit holes and weave some things together. But most of the research that I didn't have a foundation in was the bioweapon part, because in the military I didn't have any sort of a touch point with that. So that was a lot of medical journals, a lot of articles, a lot of books, a lot of just chapters in books, mentions in books. I have this reading list that goes out every month where I put up 6 books usually that I take, and I talk about where I was, how they influenced me, either as an author or as a combat leader. But the one for last month, the stack was like this tall because I went through all the books that I used for research for The Devil's Hand. So it was a lot. And one book would lead me to another. I have a question that didn't quite get answered over here, so I'd have to jump to another, or then jump online and do some research, or find a journal, or talk to people. And this is the first one that I've done because the first book, I'd been to Iraq and Afghanistan. I'd been to most of the places that I talk about. That second one, I'd been to Morocco. I'd been to Ukraine. I hadn't been to Mozambique, so I went to Mozambique, put some boots on the ground over there for that local flavor. And then that third one, I went to both South Africa to get in. I helped train up an anti-poaching unit that is focused on protecting some of the last rhino on Earth. They're switching over to Glocks and M4s, which are 2 platforms that I have some experience with. So went down there and learned a ton from those guys about man tracking. So that made it into a little bit, made it into the second book, and then into the third as well. And then I went to Russia for that third one. And I got very lucky with this one in that I didn't have to travel because it's mostly continental United States based, but I had to spend a ton of time doing this research. And it's the first one of all of them that I felt like I was a journalist in that, journalists, would think they don't just read one source and then just essentially write a book report on it. They're reading all sorts of different sources from different people, different time frames, and then they're talking to people, and not just one person, but multiple people. And when you're talking about infectious diseases and weaponization of infectious diseases, when people talk to you, depending on how deeply they were involved, they leave things out. But if you talk to more than one person, what one person leaves out, another person might put in. So you become like this, you put together this puzzle, you weave together this mosaic, talking to all these different people, and then going to confirm things in articles or other books or that sort of thing. So this one did take a lot of research, and I continued to do that research throughout the writing process because I'd run into a problem and then have to figure out how to solve it, which meant more research. So it wasn't like there was a one block of research and then I said, okay, research is done, time to write. It was kind of a continual process. Because as I wrote, you run into these things like, okay, I got to solve this problem just like I would in real life. How do I do that? Gaps in the enemy's defenses, adapting, capitalizing on momentum. All right, what am I going to do here? And you got to go down, you got to do some of that research and solve it as you go. So it was a continual research project, I'd say, all the way through to the end, because infectious diseases and the medical side of things doesn't come naturally to me. And I figured that for most of the people reading, it's also going to be an education for them as well. So I have to have characters talk to each other, and through this dialogue, essentially explain to the reader what's happening through these characters, that some might know what's going on and some don't. Some have a background in this, some don't. And so through that dialogue, the reader is going to get an education and kind of learn what's going on with the story. So it was a blast. Like, I love every part of this. I love the research. I love the writing. I love the editing. I love every single part of it. So, but it was definitely good to finish this one because, like you said, COVID hit, which meant the kids were home. And by the way, I came up with something new today. I think there needs to be 2 different New York Times bestseller lists. One for people that have children in the house under the age of 18, and then another one for people who whose children either don't have children or they are gone and they're out of the house. So I think there should be 2. I'm going to see if I can get some support on that from the New York Times.
Do you have like a normal writing schedule? Like, say when you are writing, or is it just whenever you have time?
Chaos. It's total chaos at all times. So I'm trying to get, this year's my year to get more disciplined in the approach, because up to now it's been just go, go, go. It's been like a startup, or what I would imagine a startup to be, in somebody's garage, just trying to figure out how to make things work, how to, in that case, build a client base, in this case, build a readership. So it's been busy. So some days I'll just get up, and from the second I wake up till well past midnight, I'm just writing the entire time. And there's weeks like this where it's all interviews, it's all AM radio, or it's a podcast, or it's a virtual signing, or whatever it is, and they're all spaced throughout the day in a way that doesn't allow you to take a breath and really do that deep thinking that you need to do uninterrupted when you're writing. So it's been very dynamic, I guess, is the best way, especially when the kids got booted from school last March, and everybody was home under the same roof helping me write a novel. Because as soon as everybody that had kids home during this time frame can relate, and then as soon as you close the doors to the office, it's like a magnet, like they're right there. So yeah, it was chaotic, but this is my year to take a breath and get more disciplined in the approach and set aside, like 7 in the morning to 1:30 in the afternoon, and that's just right. And for me, I have a separate computer just for the right here. So the one I'm on right here is for everything else, and then I have a computer just for writing. It's connected to the internet, but that's just for updates and for backups. There's no like emails, or there's nothing about that sort of thing. So and I found I have to go more than one room away. I can't just be one room away from this computer and all this other stuff. I have to like go up a flight of stairs, go down a hallway, go into a guest room, and lock myself in there without a phone, without these other computers, and just have that and a couple books with me, a couple research type books with me. But I find that's the most that's where I get the best work done, when all this other stuff is elsewhere.
That's so funny. Yeah, growing up, so my dad's a writer, and growing up, when he finally built like his dream home, he built a separate office. So complete, seclusion. And it's funny, until I became a writer, I didn't understand him. He would get so mad. I'd be knocking on the door all the time. And now I get it. I'm like, I don't even know. I don't know what I'm going to do when I have kids, because I feel like I'm just, 24/7 doing this.
Yeah, that's crazy. We're doing the same thing. We're looking for a place where we can have a physical separate place where you have to actually leave the house, and whether that's 20 yards away, 100 yards away, 200 yards away, whatever it is, but there's some sort of physical separation where I can.
John Grisham does that, I guess.
Yeah, I saw that. I saw where he walks out to his thing. Yeah, it's so awesome. Yeah. David McCullough does it. Like, I think I would guess that it's fairly common, especially for those with children.
Yeah. All right, well, let's go back. So I love doing research. I always go down rabbit holes, and then I just see the weeks tick by, and I need to get back writing. Was there anything that really, like, you learned that was just kind of like unforgettable? Just whether you put it in the book or not, in terms of like bioweapons, because I saw something when I was reading through the author's notes again today. One thing that really struck me was the 1972 Biological Weapons Convention essentially said, you can't have these bioweapons, or you can't test them. I didn't read the whole thing. But basically it's up to, there's no international agency that to verify the monitoring of the compliance. Is that what it is? So
exactly. It's all honor system.
That's crazy. You think
you're doing when you have an honor system type thing like that, and it's with someone that you don't trust, or no one else trusts the others not to do it. That pretty much guarantees that everyone is going to break that convention.
So kind of explain that to the audience a little bit, because that blew my mind.
Yeah, no, it was interesting because I read the whole thing, read all the signatories, and when it becomes effective and all that sort of thing. So this is the first time I've done a author's note at the end. Usually, I've had a preface every time thus far to kind of set the tone for what people are going to read, but I haven't had an author's note at the end to then explain kind of what was fact, what was fiction about what they just read. So this is the first time I've done that, just because there was so much intertwining of fact and fiction. There was so much research and so much foundational information there. But yeah, the bioweapons thing is pretty wild. So of course it's been a part of warfare essentially since the beginning of time, but my research focused on World War II up to today. And the Japanese had a very robust bioweapon program in World War II. They used it, of course. They had data, they had research. The Germans had a bioweapon program, not quite as developed as the Japanese program was. So my question was, where did that information go after the war? Where did that data go? Where did that research go? And the answer is it informed the bioweapons programs of the then Soviet Union and the United States. So from there, of course, we're in an arms race, and off we go, figuring out how to make these things more virulent. But it's interesting in that with bioweapons, it's a science, but it's also an art. And so when you really think about it, if you want to unleash something, in country X, well, it might come back to get you in country Y. eventually. So you have to figure out how it burns out in time so that it doesn't infect the rest of the world. So it just is the targeted population that you're looking at, that you're looking to impact. So that was fascinating. And then when you read the whole convention, that's what jumped out at me too, was when I saw this biodefense weapons still being allowed. Like, well, why is everybody signing this thing? So it's largely theater is my takeaway, because everybody still has bioweapons programs. Yeah, we're signatories to this thing, but even the actual document that all these countries signed says that you can have biodefense weapons. Well, if you're going to develop a biodefense weapon, you have to figure out what you're defending against, which means you have to develop the actual weapon itself, which means you have it. So it's a little bit disingenuous when we talk about these things. And I have no inside information on any of this. I had nothing to do with it when I was in the military, but it's all from the research. It's all from weaving this together, this puzzle together. And so in doing that research, it was apparent to me that yes, we have a bioweapon program. The former Soviet Union did. Russia does. Iran does. Even though we're all signatories to this thing, U.S. and Iran signing it on the same day, actually. So that was fascinating to go down the rabbit hole on some of these things. A little bit frightening in some cases. And then also, of course, with COVID hitting and reading about, and you're doing this research, of course, in that research, you're finding out about all these instances in which there were bioweapons that inadvertently got out of labs. And so you're like, oh, geez, there's precedent for this sort of thing. So it's not, I wouldn't say it's common, but I would say that it has happened before in documented cases. And of course, in those documented cases, the government lies about it, whichever government it is. And then 20 years later, 30 years later, whatever it is, it comes to light that what it actually was. So, so that was very interesting and enlightening as well. So, but the question of, was there one thing that stood out to me? I mean, the biodefense weapon thing, I didn't really realize that because I hadn't researched any of this stuff before. So that was, I guess that would stand out to me. And then I don't want to do too many spoilers, but the situation that I described, the protocols that I describe in the novel, I'd be shocked if we did not have something like that. Once again, no inside information, but just after immersing myself in this world and talking to all these different people, I would be shocked if we just if we hadn't thought this through in the way that I described in the novel.
Yeah, that's what terrified me. Because I think you used Marburg U, right, in the novel. And what was the death rate on that?
85 to 90. Yeah, 85 to 90%. Yeah. So it's there's this Marburg, which came from Marburg, Germany. It's named for where the first people came down with this thing, but it came from Africa, hemorrhagic virus. And typically, when some of these viruses invade a host, they become more virulent. So that's what happened with a doctor in the Soviet Union. He pricks his thumb. They immediately seal him off, and he essentially goes insane over the next 3 weeks, where he's taking notes about his prognosis and his deterioration as his body liquefies from the inside out to include his brain. And then after he dies, of course, they take a sample, and that sample ends up being more virulent than the original strain, which is 85 to 90% mortality rate. So in thinking of what we've done in this country with the rates that we have with COVID, the enemy, if I'm standing in the enemy's shoes, which I did for over a year writing this novel, then they're taking some notes there. So what if we had something here in this country with an 85 to 90% rate? So not the infection rate, but that mortality rate, that death rate after infection. So yeah, that all gets woven into this one.
Yeah, that'd be absolutely crazy. I do think that out of your 4 books, this is your best one. I'm not just saying that because I'm saying it to your face, but no, I really did. I was very, very impressed with it. So again, congrats.
I'm hearing that from a lot of people too, which is always great to hear, especially if you're coming off one that people really liked, like Savage Son. Up to this point, Savage Son was, the feedback wise, of course, totally unscientific. People really liked that one of the 3. So it's very cool to hear this time around that people like this one even better. So that's thank goodness.
Yeah. No, I just like how they're all different. Especially just coming from Savage Son to this. Like Savage Son was such like most dangerous game in Kamchatka Peninsula. And it was so funny when that book came out. I think that was a week a week before I got my deal. And I remember
Nice.
seeing your new book and I was like, oh, and I was reading about it. It's Kamchatka Peninsula. And my first thought was, I just spent 5 years of my life and he comes in and just
Wow.
does that. But I mean, it works. I mean, I don't know. It was just a really cool place. I never heard of it until I started doing research for my book. You know, I was just a poor aspiring writer when I was researching it. So I couldn't go to the Kamchatka Peninsula. Um,
It's
what was
crazy over
that?
there.
What
So
was the Kamchatka like? I want to know more about like
yeah.
being boots on the ground.
Yes, of course I read Last of the Breed, Louis L'Amour, which was one of the other. There's 4 novels that inspired Savage Son, but I wanted to put some boots over down on the ground there and what they call the taiga, their tundra. I wanted to see what that was like, and so I knew I had to go there, and it was interesting because being so busy, I didn't take a breath really and think about how it might be different than other places that I've researched. So when I was in Africa, both in Mozambique and then in South Africa, 2 totally separate trips, everybody in those countries, it seemed like anyway, wanted to tell me the story of their country. They wanted to talk about the politics. They wanted to talk about the economy. They wanted to talk about poaching. They wanted to talk about Chinese influence and Chinese mining operations, both legal and illegal. They wanted to talk about all these things, corruption in government, like all. They just wanted to tell me their story, and they were so awesome. Everybody was so amazing to me, and I learned a ton from everybody. And then I was like, of course it's going to be that way in Russia. Everybody's going to want to talk to me.
No one
And
said
so
a
I
word.
flew over there. Yeah, no one wanted to say a word.
They all
And
thought
I
you were
think that's
spies.
because, for most of Russian history, if someone was asking you pointed questions,
Yeah.
particularly of the kind that you ask if you're writing a political thriller, you weren't long for this world. I was off to the gulag, it was off to the firing squad, re-education camps. So no one wanted to talk. So eventually I wore them down because I went into the backcountry out there and spent some time and it was incredible. Yeah, it was really cool. So
Did
I
you tell
eventually
people that you
wore
were a
them
writer?
down and got to get some local flavor in there. And
Nice.
mosquitoes were crazy. People talk about Alaska mosquitoes, and I've been up to Alaska a few times, and I spent 73 days up there once, and I love Alaska. I just love it up there. But I for whatever reason, I've been very lucky with mosquitoes in Alaska on all my trips. Kamchatka, no. In Russia, the mosquitoes were insane. I have some pictures. I've
Really?
been covered in these crazy. I was talking about it now. It's making the blood like drain from my face. Like I'm just covered in these bites. Like it was crazy. Like when people say mosquitoes eat you alive, like that's a place where they could really eat you alive. I must have hit the season just right. So it was great. And I'll definitely be going back.
Cool. Uh, some of the research I did of the peninsula or just all Western Russia it's like going back into like the 1940s, 1950s in terms of like infrastructure. Was it like that on the peninsula or was that
So this
more?
is just south of Siberia,
Yeah.
So on that far eastern side, that peninsula that comes down, the island I talk about is just off that, kind of just offshore there. But it was I wouldn't say that. So I only saw like when we landed, I was shocked in that there's military aircraft everywhere. And I took these videos and I took these pictures because I brought a separate camera, not my phone. I bought a camera just for this trip, just so I could take some of those photos. And I was shocked at all the stuff. I mean, it looked like all the planes that I was reading about in the 80s, reading Tom Clancy, reading the 80s and 90s. They looked like that, the Foxbat and this and that. It looked like anyway. So I'm taking all these videos, and then the town. It's been a while since I've been to some of these places. Like it's been a while since I've been to Ukraine, but it didn't seem as 1950s as like it was. It seemed like actually a modern city. But as soon as you're outside of that, then it's like you're in Alaska. It's just like anywhere else, except the trucks look a little different. So those things are just a little bit off. Like that's an interesting car. That's an interesting van. It's just Russian. I don't know a better way to describe it than that. And I took pictures of all these cars because I want to. That's the kind of things that I'm looking for when I'm going over there. I'm looking at look at these cars here, look at these trucks here. Is this an old military vehicle? Oh, interesting. Or is this just an old military vehicle that's still a military vehicle?
Yeah.
Sort of thing. So I'm taking pictures of all those things, cars I've never heard of before, and I think I'm pretty up to date on that sort of stuff. But I always find interesting things no matter where I go, and yeah, Kamchatka definitely had some different stuff, things that are made in Russia. But of course, I still find the Land Cruisers over there. Still Land Cruisers made me very happy to see those over there because I'm a big Land Cruiser fan. People that have read my novels know that. But so it's cool to see some of those over there, and I got pictures.
Nice. Yeah, I guess the Kimchaka is the new place to go heli skiing. It's no
Oh, is that
longer.
right?
Yep. So I guess that's like the untapped place. Like everyone's going there. They have those huge vehicles that you can live in and just goes across the taiga. Helicopter picks you up top of the volcano, ski down. But yeah,
Interesting.
that's like the new
Yeah,
thing.
helicopters were the mode of transportation over there. Those Mi-8s, and we like it's like when you go to Alaska, you're Canada, you're in the bush plains, that sort of thing. Well, it's helicopters over there, and these huge ones. I got crazy pictures of these helicopters, but that's how we got around is in these old military helicopters. That it was made me kind of nervous at first walking up, but they're amazing. They're like AK-47s, like they're gonna work. Yeah,
Yeah.
essentially, and they're and you can see them working actually. You're not like hitting something and it's all electronic. Like it's like,
Yeah,
you can see them working, if that makes sense. It's pretty cool.
that's cool. Did you tell when you travel like to a place like Russia, do you tell them you're a writer or do you just make something else up?
Yeah, no, I did. Yeah.
Okay.
And then when I was going into Mozambique, in which one was that? It was in the late summer, early fall of 2016. So I hadn't even sent my first novel to Simon and Schuster yet, but I knew I was always going to write too, because John Grisham's story where he couldn't give a time to kill away, which is his first novel, and then he writes The Firm, and then off to the races he goes. And I think A Time to Kill is still one of his best works. So I was always going to write two. So I was on my way over there, and I remember filling out that customs form on the way in, and it said occupation, and then I wrote down writer. So it was pretty cool. And I got that from Stephen Pressfield from his books of his series on creativity. He has Do the Work, Turning Pro, War of Art, Authentic Swing, Warrior Ethos, and then Turning Pro. I was like, okay, this is what I do. I'm a writer now.
Yeah, I did the same thing.
Take a picture of it.
No, even when I was in college, I read The War of Art, and that changed everything. That was the point where, I mean, it was almost like better than going to school for writing in a way.
Yeah, no, it's all this stuff is fantastic, and you can get through them in like an hour and a half. You can read those things. It's not like it's not a daunting task. It's not, you'll be able to get through those things. So anybody that is in the creative space at all, it doesn't even need to be the creative space, but particularly in the creative space, like reading his series of books on creativity, is probably a wise decision.
I have a question. So what would you tell aspiring writers? Now that you're 4 books in, you're working on number 5, you probably get this a lot. People come up to you and say, I want to be a writer. What do I do? And I know, I mean, I have people who ask me that. What would you say?
Yeah. So now I know how many people do that. When I talked to Brad Thor for the first time, he gave me this piece of advice, and it resonated with me because of my time in the military and in the SEAL teams, and how easy we make it to self-select out of the program and ring a bell 3 times and quit. And he said, hey, the only difference between a published author and an unpublished author is that the published author never quit. And that really resonated with me. So there's that. And then the other thing is, like, you can work on something forever. Like if you wanted to spend another 10 years on this, like it would get better, but it might get better by that much. So you got, and it's different for everybody, but I think you have to get your work to a place where you're like, okay, this is good. And if I spend the next 10 years on it, the next 20 years on it, the next 30 years on it, yes, it will get better, but it'll get better by that much. So I think that's kind of the goal. That's what you're looking for. Because you can hold on to something forever. And I think probably that some of the best books ever written are in someone's drawer, whether in their nightstand or on their hard drive of a computer somewhere, because they're still trying to tweak it and refine it and make it better. And they probably are, but it also probably needs to see the light of day. So there's and that point will be different for everybody, but I think you can hold on to something a little too long before kicking it out there into the wild. And you have to know that, yeah, some people are going to be critical, but if you go online and look at your favorite novel on Amazon, someone will have hated it. Someone will give it a 1 star and just spend 3 paragraphs telling the world how horrible it is. So there's no way around that in today's day and age. So you just got to have the courage to put it out there, kick it into the wild, and be able to know that, yeah, some people are going to hate it, but not everybody.
Yep. No, I know how that is. Very cool. There is one thing that I thought was one of the coolest components of your book. I'm trying not to give a lot away, but there was a point in The Devil's Hand where you had a scene or scenes of these 2 guys who were on, I don't remember what, it was either the the plane that hit the towers or the Pentagon. I can't remember. It was Abdulaziz Omari and Mohammed Atta. They, on the morning of September 10th, drove from Boston to Portland, Maine to get on a plane to come back to Boston to get on the plane that hit, was either the tower or the Pentagon. I can't remember.
Yeah,
And you said, and then in chapter 1 of the 9/11 Commission report, it read, no physical, documentary, or analytical evidence provides a convincing explanation of why Atta and Omari drove to Portland, Maine from Boston the morning of September 10th. And you did something really cool with that. Again, weaving in fiction and history. You know, that's what I'm trying to do with book 2. And just seeing how you did, I was like, wow, okay. That was, I mean, and has there been nothing expanded on that? How deep did you dive is what I'm trying to ask.
Well, the 9/11 Commission report has quite a bit on this, and what, interestingly enough, the two things that I explore. I mean, I explore a lot around 9/11 and facilitation of 9/11 and that sort of thing. But I think the two main components that still have so many unanswered questions are that trip right there, and then there's a sentence about Iran's involvement, and it says that we recommend that the United States government look into this further. That's not the exact words, I don't have it in front of me, but it's something similar, something to that effect. And then no follow-up. So in doing my research for this, I found out that, and I had a very strong base as far as international terrorism, Al Qaeda, that sort of thing, Hezbollah, Hamas, all that. But I got to go deeper. So it's an excuse for me to spend a day, 2 days, 3 days, and get sidetracked and then go back to it, and research these things that I already have a foundation in. So I think that really helps to already have that, and then to go deeper and kind of explore some of the more nuanced aspects of the relationships between Al Qaeda as it's being developed really in the Sudan, and trips that were taken to Tehran, and then Hezbollah officials and Iranian officials going to Sudan. So there's this Sunni Shia divide is not quite as, and I had some firsthand experience with the Sunni Shia divide when the Golden Mosque bombing happened in Iraq in 2006. I was there for that, at the tactical level, doing some things. And so exploring that relationship, particularly in the 90s, and what relationships were developed there, was extremely interesting to me. So those are really the two facets of that day that I go deep into, is that Iranian involvement, and then that trip to Portland, Maine, and why they did that. And the prevailing wisdom is that, hey, they just thought that they could go through security there and it'd be lax, and that's possible. That's probably what it is. But then they had to go back through security when they got to Boston anyway. And then some of the 9/11 hijackers got secondary screenings, that sort of thing. So it's fascinating to go back into that, but it was also so sad because everybody remembers where they were on 9/11. I was on my second deployment. It was about midnight in Guam, and these phones started ringing up and down the hallway, and we watched the Twin Towers fall on TV from the basement where we had a television there. So everybody remembers that has that link. But so going back into that and then listening to those phone calls again, and I've been to the 9/11 memorial, spent time there, but then going back now as research for the book and listening to those phone calls from the people on the plane, knowing they're going to die, saying goodbye to their loved ones, like it was emotional. Like a lot of this was emotional to write. And to go back into that, and then you read the stories, then you go deep dive and you see this person's name, and then you keep reading the, whatever was written about them, and you find out about their family and who they left behind or who they knew on another plane, even like that, just some crazy stuff like that and connections. So that was so it was a very emotional thing to both research and write.
Yeah, I can only imagine. I got one more thing. Yak, Montana, book number 3. You had some scenes in Yak, Montana. How did you find out about Yak, Montana? Because I grew up hunting there when I was a kid.
Oh, nice.
And when I saw that, I just burst out laughing because I think there's 12 people who live in Yak, Montana.
That's funny. Yeah, so I had friends that hunted up there. So same type of thing. So try to find that remote type of a remote spot that made sense for the story. I'd been to Whitefish and Flathead Valley and Kalispell, that sort of thing. And always loved Montana. I want to spend more time there. I think I've only been there maybe 4 or 5 times now, but I want to spend more time up there. But yeah, so that's just from friends that have hunted that same area, probably exactly where you did growing up.
Yep. Cool.
Yeah.
So should we turn this over to the audience a little bit, or?
Yeah, so you guys some questions out there.
Cool. Let me see if I can figure this out.
Yeah, we can see those some questions in the sidebar, but yeah, this was a good one because it was the longest. And I didn't really realize that as I was writing. You don't really know, at least I don't, how long it's going to be. Even though I start with a 1-page executive summary, I turn that into an outline, and then I take that outline and turn it into the book. I don't really know exactly how long. I mean, I know it's going to be over 100,000 words, but I don't know how much over. The first one was like 114,000 words. Second one was the longest, and I thought that would for sure remain the longest. That wasn't the case. This one
What was
is
this
by
one?
far, I think it was 130.
Okay.
And a couple of things added to that, like that author's note added, even though it's just a couple, I thought it was just going to be like a page, and then it turned into 3 or 4 or 5 pages at the end of the book. So it did end up being a lot longer than I anticipated at the outset. But yeah, you don't know as you develop these characters. And for me, when I get to know these characters in that outline, I have their names and I have it attached to like a position. So I'll have a name, President of the United States, name, Director of the CIA, whatever that, whatever their position is. But I don't have their personality attached unless I already know it because it's a recurring character. So the way I get to know these characters is then through the dialogue, through their interactions with one another as I'm writing the dialogue specifically. And I love doing that. And in this one, there's 2 characters that are turning out to be fan favorites. And I initially wrote them as I don't know if I should say this or not. They were going to have a different ending, but I got to like them too. Just like the readers are getting to like these 2 guys that are doing this surveillance in this vehicle. They're surveilling the protagonist, James Reese, and I had a way different ending for them. But just through their interactions, through writing that dialogue and getting to know them and having them get to know each other in this surveillance van, I ended up liking them too much, and I couldn't. So they have a different ending than they have in my outline. But people contact me about it all the time and say that these 2 guys were my favorite. They're so funny, or whatever else it is. They're turning out to be some fan favorites, even though they're written as bad guys.
Sweet. All right, we got 2 questions so far. Yeah, so keep asking your questions. First one is from Jeremy. Jack, how do you write just awesomely violent fight sequences?
Oh, this is a good question. So the first one, just thinking, just from my mind, just writing. Second one, though, I wrote the chapter, and then I sent it to my buddy. And my buddy he trains these top tier special operations units. So all he does is combatives. So that means he's doing the jujitsu, he's doing, the boxing, he's doing Thai boxing, he's doing all that stuff with gear. And so he's training, our top tier special operations units. So yeah, unarmed stuff, but then also if you have your rifle up and it gets trapped, like what to do. So I sent the chapter to him, and he put on his gear because it was a specific chapter where these guys have gear on, body armor, nods, their rifles, pistols, blades, and he put it on and he went through it for me. And with one of these, like a dummy. And so I watched it and played it back, and then I added to the chapter that I had written by watching like his body position to see what his hip does here, or how he draws the blade from where on his plate carrier and that sort of thing. So I did the same thing for Savage Son, and then the same thing for this. So it's just a dear friend that's out there tonight who doesn't have a website, doesn't have a social media presence or anything like that, but his only job in life is to develop some of these top tier special operators into some of the most dangerous people on the planet, and he's very good at it. So so that really does help, because I have it in my mind. It's kind of like a plan. Like in the military, you're sitting around a table and you come up with this plan, you think it's perfect, and then someone comes in from the outside and is like, oh, that wasn't intimately involved with this creation, and like points something out, and you're like, something totally obvious. And even then, once you get it refined to the point where you're like, okay, here we go, we have this base, and now off we go. Same thing, when the bullets start flying, that plan shifts and morphs, and that's just how it goes. So it's very same thing with this. So I think it looks great in this chapter. Then I send it to my buddy, and he acts it out, and then I find so much more nuance that I can add from there.
That's really cool. All right. Oh, we got a bunch of them. All right, so from Drew, Jack, what made you and your family pick Utah once you retired? Also, shout out to Bill Ray Pierre for his suggestion of your books.
Awesome. Bill Rapier, awesome. So Amtac blades, Amtac shooting. Yeah, Seal Buddy, who makes a great blade, and which is used in this novel. But yeah, we started coming up here because I built up so much leave while I was in the military, because for the first 16 years I didn't really take any. So by the time I got back from my last Iraq deployment and I knew I wasn't gonna stay in, I made the decision that it's time to get out, move on, take care of the family. I went to a shore duty at BUD/S, so I became the operations officer for our SEAL training program, and I had all this leave built up, and so we just started to take it, because BUD/S is kind of push-ups, sit-ups, rope climbs. Like, it's been doing this for a while, and it was the first time I wasn't taking guys down range. So it was the first time where I took a breath and decided, okay, it's time to get out, time to focus on the family. But also during these last couple of years of where I'm in, I'm not taking guys down range anymore. So because for the first 16 years, it was every single thing I did was to make myself a better operator, a better combat leader, because that's what I thought I owed the guys I was taking down range, what I owed their families, the country, the mission. So I just built up all this leave, because the pendulum was on the side of the team. And it was then when I got back from Iraq, I decided to get out. Okay, now it's time to have that start shifting over here. So we started to come up to Utah. We started to come up here to ski. And it's so much easier to get from San Diego to Park City, Utah, than it is to drive through all these different bands of traffic in Southern California and work your way up to any of these other ski resorts if you're driving. So we started coming out here and just fell in love with it. And then we have a middle child with some very severe special needs, and there's this place called the National Ability Center out here, and they help people of all abilities and disabilities and get them outside and get them on skis, and it's just amazing facility, and amazing organization. So that's the main reason why we're here.
That's great. Yeah, I lived in Park City for a couple of years.
Nice.
So yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, we love it out here. Although we're getting a little bit of same thing you guys are getting up there. We're getting a little bit of an influx here from the coasts. It's making it very difficult to find this next house.
It is crazy here. I'm actually my wife and I are in the market for our first house.
Oh, nice.
And I think the median house price has went up 46% since last March.
It's insane.
And there's like 3 houses on the market.
Yeah, there's like nothing here. They go off before they even hit the MLS. There's already a deal. So it's a little bit of my wife's getting a little nervous because we're only in this rental for a certain amount of time. So
oh really? Yeah.
We're looking actively.
Yeah. Hopefully it ends. Yeah. All right. It's from Nicholas, Dirk Pitt, and James Reese. Frenemies or truly get along?
Yeah, they'll get along for sure. Yeah. They might argue about best watches. Doxa versus Rolex. But they'll definitely get along, do some undersea adventures together.
Cool. All right, here's kind of a writing questions from Anonymous. You mentioned you have a separate computer for writing. Do you use a specialized program such as Scrivener or standard word processing application? Curious if you found one better or how you approach writing. Yeah,
so I found out about Scrivener as I was nearing the end. It might be a little fuzzy on details, nearing the end of True Believer. And so then I committed to it for Savage Son. So all of Savage Son was written on Scrivener. And it's such a cool program because if you've used Word, it's very intuitive. You can drag your research into chapters instead of like trying to find something again and be like, what was the name of that? It's not self-populating. I can't find this article. Or you've done a ton of research and everything's kind of lit up blue in your search bar, like you've hit it before and you can't remember which one, and you just want to confirm this one little detail. Well, Scrivener is so great because you can drag and drop that right into the chapter that you're writing, so you don't have to like go back through. It's just very efficient, very effective. And then I thought I was going to use it for this fourth one as well, and for whatever reason, I just didn't. I just went to Word. And that might be because I just, with all the interruptions from the kiddos being home and everything, that I just jumped right back into what I had used more often than not, which is Word over the years. So I did this fourth one all in Word. But yeah, Scrivener is great, and you can export to Word, import to Word. And they make it very easy to do that with a lot of these tutorial videos they have that are just fantastic. So I think if you can commit to it and go all in on it, that it would be great. And I really don't have a good explanation for why I went all in for Savage Son and then went back to Word for The Devil's Hand, because I really did like Scrivener, and it worked out so well for Savage Son.
Cool. All right, Jeremy asks, Jack, What's the correct pronunciation of Katie's last name? It differed from Terminalist to True Believer on Audible.
Oh, did it? Gosh, I'm not an Audible person, so I listened to the first one just because it was my first book. But I'm a physical book person, and I actually have the same question, and I have it not just with her name, but with multiple pronunciations of things. Because when I'm writing, you don't say it, like you see it, and like even the terminal list, like I thought I'm like I love the title, and it works on a few different levels, and I never said it out loud for like a year and a half, probably almost 2 years. And the first time I said it out loud, it has the end L and then the other L, so the terminal list. And the first time I said it out loud, I was like, oh no, it's like they blend. Like you have to like distinctly say the terminal list instead of like terminal list because it blends together. So there's been a few like that. So Katie Buranek, I think is how, but I've read it too, just like everybody else. And so yeah, the title, her last name, and there's a few other ones out there that you just read and don't say out loud because you're just in your quiet space and you're doing your deep thinking, and it's in the novel and it becomes the person's name. And then there's a few names that you put there as placeholders, at least me anyway. So I put it like placeholders, like I'm gonna come up with a better name, and you put it in there. But then over the course of a year, like you get to know that person as that name, and it becomes the name of the character, and you can't change it. So that's happened a few times as well. So and I think that's going to continue to happen just with how busy everything is. It's just yeah, it's just crazy at all times. So that's a fantastic question, and it's yeah, it's one that I do think about as I'm writing. And when something is pops up like that, and I say, I'm gonna go back, I'm gonna figure this out, I'm gonna go and I'm gonna do a search, and I'm gonna listen to a YouTube video and find out how you actually say some of these things. And then you just get so busy that or at least I do anyway, that there's a few things that I have not gone back and checked like that. So great question though, I love it.
All right, this is from Mark Elliott. Jack, you are crushing the merchandising and social media platforms. Was that by design initially, or was it adapted as you go?
Adapted for sure. So yeah, when I started, I thought you just wrote in a cabin in the mountains and then sent your book to New York and then started the next one. That was my expectation, having read everything growing up in the 80s and 90s, continuing to read. I never really thought about the business side of it at all, other than, oh, Tom Clancy has a video game, he has a board game, he has, all these other things. Like I thought of it in that sense, but nothing more than that. I thought it was just writing. And then about, I don't know, I had an inkling about a year before the book came out that, okay, there's some other platforms out here. I see obviously authors have websites. I see some have Facebook things, although I never had an account. I remember when Instagram hit, I told my wife, I'm like, why would someone want to share pictures with people? Like I can just email my parents pictures of the kids. Like that's what I thought. And then Twitter, I'm like, oh, this seems like just dangerous. Especially in the SEAL teams, I looked at everything from how's the enemy going to exploit them, and then they brought people in to talk to us about, hey, here's open source, here's what you can do, and they showed us all these things that you can do open source, and just make all these connections, like who's out of town, when people are posting, who they're friends with, and they put together this whole diagram of this like entire team, and you can tell when people are gone and when they're home, of course, which is good information for the enemy. And there's just so much you could get just open source. So I was always like, okay, nope, no social media. Now it's different. Now, if you don't have a social media and you're in special operations, particularly in the dark side of special operations, doing some more shadowy type stuff, if you don't have a social media presence, that's the red flag now. So
really?
We shifted from when I was in. Yeah. So 2006, if you didn't have a social media presence, that no big deal. Today, if you don't have one from the enemy's perspective, okay, red flag. So it's an interesting thing to grapple with, and something that I'll explore in the novels for sure. Because that's totally, I'm glad I'm doing it from this side actually now. I'm glad I'm out and writing now. But so then as we got closer to publication of the first book, I think my first post was Christmas of 2017. So if you go back to the bottom of my Instagram, you can see I'm very tentative. Like I'm like, okay, here's a picture of this. I'm not in them for the first like 2 months, and then there's like a side profile of me like this, and then there's like one like this ish. So I eased into it, but at the same time, I was learning, and just like on the battlefield, you're always looking for ways to adapt quicker than the enemy. You're always looking to capitalize on momentum, do these things. I saw that, hey, this was not available to an author in 1965, 75, 85, 95. You could not engage with a readership. You could not build a readership on your own. You were almost entirely reliant on your publisher to help you do that by scheduling traditional type of interviews, print and media. But there's only so many assets that the publisher can allocate towards you. And just like in the movies where the Avengers pays for everybody else, in publishing the same way, like Stephen King and John Grisham like pay for everybody else. And so it's very similar in that respect. So I thought, well, I've been adapting on the battlefield for all these years. I'm just going to do the same thing looking at this space. So I didn't even really look at publishing. I looked at across industry, and I thought, like, why is my getting my iPhone such a different experience than getting my BlackBerry back in the day? Because just as much thought went into the package as went into what was in the package. How does Red Bull launch a drink? You know, they don't just all of a sudden just launch it and not do a coordinated campaign. So I just took these different lessons and then applied them to these new platforms, to podcasts and social media and blog postings and that sort of thing. And then I looked at it the same way as I looked at writing, in that someone is trusting me with their time, whether they're listening to Ray Porter narrate for 12 hours or they're spending a week in the pages of my novel. They're trusting me with their time. And same thing with social media. Like you only have so much time on this planet, and you get to choose how you're going to spend that time. And these people have trusted me, whether they're following me on social media or they're reading the book. So I need to, so it's a responsibility that I take seriously, and I at least owe my best effort, and I owe them a thoughtful post on social media. I owe them all my effort into the novel. That's why this fifth one I'm working on now, I know how it ends. I know how 6-1 starts. I know the title. So I'm not wasting any bandwidth worried about the title. Like, I need to figure this out as I'm writing. No, I already know. I know exactly how it ends. So I'm not worried as I'm writing, oh, geez, how am I going to wrap this up? Like, all my effort and energies are focused into making book 5 the best it can possibly be. There's no wasted bandwidth anywhere else. So I kind of like to, that's the way I like to operate, and like to just put the requisite time, energy, effort, and thought into everything that I do. Into everything.
Awesome. All right. HP says, big fan, read first 3 novels, waiting for my shipment on Devil's Hand. It's en route. The terminal list seems to transcend rote entertainment fiction. Did you intend a greater meaning to the work? I see it as a powerful metaphor to accomplish or complete a list of sorts. My takeaway.
That's awesome. No, I haven't heard that one before, but it was when I first started, when I wrote that 1-page executive summary and then wrote the outline. I still thought it was going to be, hey, it's going to be a great book, but it's just going to be an escape. And then as soon as I transitioned from that outline and started to actually write, immediately, first sentence, it was clear that this was going to be a much more personal writing experience than I anticipated at the outset. And I was going to incorporate a lot of the feelings and emotions behind things I was involved with downrange and apply them to a fictional narrative, which I think made it resonate with Emily Bessler at Simon & Schuster when she got it, and continues to make it resonate with readers. And then the theme is revenge without constraint. And I had that on a yellow sticky that was right here on my computer, just like this, was right here the whole time. And that's because I misinterpreted something that Stephen Pressfield told Joe Rogan when he was on that podcast. And I thought he said that he had a 1-word theme for his novels on it by his typewriter as he typed away. And so that's my takeaway. And so I put revenge right here. And the second one, I put redemption. And I think that really helped in that it, whether directly or indirectly, everything, whether it was a sentence, a paragraph, chapter, had to go back to that theme. So when I got to Emily at Simon & Schuster, there were very few content edits coming from her because I stayed on theme that whole time. So so I think that was helpful. Also, I misinterpreted what Stephen Pressfield said. He was telling a story about a playwright who wrote a sentence theme for his plays next to his typewriter. So I'm glad I misinterpreted that. But yeah, first one, you can read it as just this novel of revenge without constraint, or you can read it as, hey, this is about someone he's abandoning everything that he's believed in and fought for his entire life, and he is becoming that insurgent. He's becoming the terrorist that he fought. And you can go a little bit deeper and read it as, hey, this is a veteran of Iraq and Afghanistan bringing those wars home to the front doors of people who have been sending young men and women to their deaths for what is now 20 years. So there's a few different levels to read that novel.
Very cool. Now, I actually have a question. Were you writing in the SEAL teams, or did you just go get out, write terminal lists, and you're just kind of a phenom at it, or were you
No,
practicing?
no. So I decided to get out when I got back from my last Iraq deployment, but I still had a few years left to do.
Okay.
And then I put those different ideas down on the table in December of 2014, as if memory serves, right around then anyway. So I had another 14 and 15, another year and a half in the SEAL team. So, but when you drop your papers in the military, for those who have been in, so you drop your papers and tell them you're getting out, you go on a different pile. All of a sudden, you're not like on this track. It's like, oh, now your job becomes to get out of the military, which means in the gigantic bureaucracy, you have to stand in line. And you stand in line to go to medical, to go to dental, to get read out of secret programs. And first you stand in line though to make an appointment to then stand in line again. So that's how these things work. That's how these gigantic bureaucracies work. So point being, I had time, and so it was during that last year and a half that I really started writing, because that's about when I dropped my papers, and knew that this was what I wanted to do, and it's what I wanted to do since I was a little kid. Wanted to serve my country in uniform from age 7. At age 10, I started reading the same things as my parents, and knew that after my time in the military that I would write. So that's exactly what I did. I listened to that calling and did it. So by the time I got to retirement in the summer of 2016, I still had a couple more months to refine and get it as good as I could get it to that place where if I spent the next 20 years on it, it was only going to be like this.
Mm-hmm.
So I still had a couple more months, because it was like this. I still had this much to go, or this much to go, I should say. And so yeah, about a year and a half, and then about another 3 or 4 months of refining and reading and just editing myself and trying to get it as good as I could get it before I sent it to Emily, and then sent it to Emily in November of 2016, and then she called me in December, and we went from there. But and then now it's one a year. So yes, I was writing in the military for that last year and a half.
Cool. All right, this is from Tom Dooley, who is from Missoula. Is Reese going to get another hot rod to drive?
Don't give any spoilers away. Don't give any spoilers away, but if you got to the end, you'll know that he is in a different vehicle there that was passed on to him. If you read the third book, you'll know which one that is. So I'm still grappling with what he's going to do with that one, because there are some great places out there that do some amazing things with Wagoneers. But then I also have a guy in LA right now that's building me an FJ40, got Corsetti cruisers, and dropping an LS3 in that thing. So we'll see. We'll see. I guess that's the best way to answer that question. I haven't decided yet.
Cool. All right. Is there a reason James Reese notably has no tattoos while others such as villains, etc., do?
That's a good question. Well, I use it as a joke in there in the third novel. Like we have a little joke in about him not having tattoos, and that being his greatest accomplishment from his time in uniform. And yeah, I guess it's because I missed that. I just missed the tattoo thing. Like I was right on the cusp of it. And now I think everybody in the SEAL teams and anybody that does CrossFit is just totally tatted up everywhere. So I just came in, and I remember I was in the Philippines, and I was like, okay, this is my time. I'm gonna get, the op tempo is not what it was in Iraq and Afghanistan, and really I'm here to advise and assist this Philippine Marine general who's been fighting an insurgency in the Southern Island chain for his entire time in uniform. So I was learning a ton from him about insurgencies, particularly from that part of the world. But tattoos are very popular over there, and so I'm like, all right, this is my time. I'm doing it. And so I had them put on a bone frog on one arm, and I was working out like a madman. So I was like 220 and just crushing. It was probably the best shape of my life. And so I had put a bone frog here and put like something else here. And then I got it, but it was fake ones. It was like the ones they go over, then they trace it or whatever. And then I got on a Skype, whatever it was with my wife, whatever video thing. And I leaned back, and I was going to make it a surprise because they looked real. And so I went like that, like lean back. And she's like, "What's that on your arms?" And I'm like, "Oh, I got some tattoos." And she's like, "Oh." I was like, "What? That's your response?" Like nothing, not like, "Oh, those are terrible," or "Oh, I love them." Like if she had done either one of those, I was good doing it. But she was like, "Oh." I was like, "Dang it!" And then I just never did it. So, yeah, so no tattoos for me. So that's that's I kind of wove that into my character as well.
Yeah, one of my good family friends, he was in your line of work as well. He just retired, and he said the same exact thing. I asked him, like, "What was your biggest accomplishment?" He's like, "Well, I didn't get any tattoos in the teams." Okay, I read that in a book somewhere too.
That's it. There you go.
All right, this is a good one. Jack, do you feel judged in Hollywood based on the subject matter of your books, or do you feel surrounded by other like-minded people there in the film industry?
Great question. So I didn't know until about 2 weeks ago when I was on set, and I didn't really know what to expect, and got to set, and it was 350 people working on this thing.
Wow.
And it was just crazy. And it was like a military operation. It was like Kraft Food Services. That's a logistics chain. You got to feed the army type thing. Antoine Fuqua directing there. He's like the commanding officer of the team. He's just a fantastic person. One of my favorite people on earth. Chris Pratt, so great. I mean, none of it would be happening without him. And he's like the platoon commander, tactical level leader. And then you have the weapons guy, just like in a team, and you're signing weapons out and turning them back in. Same thing with your nods and your comms, your gear, like all that stuff gets accounted for. And explosives. There's an explosive guy, just like we have a breacher on the team. So he's there. Transportation guy. They have a transportation guy, just like we have a mobility guy on the team. So very similar to a military operation. I was shocked at how efficient everything is, how good everyone was at their job. Like, it blew me away. And so I guess to answer that specific question, everyone was so nice. Every single person came up to me, and not every single person, everyone that did come up to me made the point of saying how this set felt different than other sets they'd been on. And that comes from Antoine and Chris up at the top, and that's how they lead and what good people they are. And then we had like 12 SEALs on set that I'd worked with in the teams, and I knew that a couple of them were going to be there, but I didn't know that all of them were going to be there. So we had like a reunion on set, and
Cool.
some of them were playing SEALs, others are doing the stunt coordination or the technical advising. So we had a blast on set. But to answer that question, everybody was so nice. I didn't get the sense at all that there was any sort of like animosity because of any undertones or any politics or anything like that. Everybody was just excited to be working on a project and excited to do their job the best that they possibly could to contribute to that cause. And that was my takeaway. So it was pretty special.
Awesome. All right, we got a couple more, and then we can wrap this up. Jack, with James Reese coming to Amazon Prime, any chance of a big screen adventure?
I don't know. I think that's up to Chris Pratt now, and probably how it does on Amazon Prime as a series. So I think there's a few different things that can happen, but right now I'm just along for the ride, and extremely happy to be here. That's kind of how I'm just, yeah, it's all good to me.
All right. All right. Is there any chance we see Reese cross over with Court Gentry or Scott Harvath in the future? That would be insanely cool.
I do get that question a lot, so I don't know. We'll see. Just I would say there's always possibilities.
Sweet. All right. There's one more, but I don't know if it's a question. I'm a big fan of espionage military thriller novels. One thing that I fear I'm missing is finding debut novels by authors, whether or not they served in the military or intelligence services or not. I'm thrilled that Connor Sullivan is on the talk tonight. His debut novel, Sleeping Bear, is coming out this summer and has received several favorable reviews. Another debut is coming out this fall and is called The Damascus Station, written by a former CIA analyst. I'm looking for ways to find these debuts so I don't miss them. I welcome any feedback you may wish to share.
That's a great
Yeah.
question too. Actually, I read Damascus Station. It's awesome. I blurbed it. So yeah, it's really good. And this one's, and Sleeping Bear is fantastic too. I can't wait to get to keep reading. But yeah, that's interesting about how to find. Obviously, the internet's here, and you follow people and you look at recommendations from other people that you trust. So I think that's just it. It's like the word of mouth thing is so powerful. And so you got to find those people. Of course, the Real Book Spy is a great resource. There's a new thing, Thriller. What is it? The Thriller Writers on Twitter. So there's a couple different resources out there. But Ryan Steck at the Real Book Spy is probably a good one to.
Yeah, Ryan's awesome.
Because he'll get a lot of books across his desk, and he'll take a look, and then he'll let you know about it. So I would definitely follow him on Twitter, or sign up for his newsletter if you're not already. But that's probably a really good resource. And just following people on social. I mean, you can use it for positive. You don't have to use it to divide and be incendiary and increase your stress levels. You can just stop following all those kind of people and follow people that like books. Like that's primarily my whole Twitter feed is all authors and readers. I think that's probably, for the most part, that's really all it is. And I think that's probably a good way to go. That's one way you can use social media, particularly Twitter, and just follow people that are readers and that are other authors that are going to be recommending other books. And I think that's probably the best way to go. Make use of that modern technology. Use it for good.
Yeah, Atrium Mystery Bus on Twitter.
Atrium Mystery Bus, the bus. Absolutely.
Cool.
All
I think
right.
that about wraps it up.
Yeah, I just jumped in. Everyone can see me
No problem.
again. Yeah, thank you guys so much. That was wonderful. I loved the energy
thank
of the
you.
conversation. Yeah. Thank you, Jack and Connor, for being here tonight. Congratulations, both of you, on your books. They're amazing. And thank you, everyone who is watching and participating tonight. Just as a reminder, you can purchase The Devil's Hand on Fact and Fiction's website, factandfictionbooks.com. And remember to enter MBF at checkout. And, audience tonight, make sure that you're ordering tonight so that you can get a free advanced reading copy of Connor's Sleeping Bear. So do that now. I also urge you to purchase Montana Book Festival merchandise at montanabookfestival.com. There you can also donate so that we can continue events like this up until the 2021 Book Festival. So thank you again, everyone. Have a wonderful night.